Let's move to the other game that we watched. SMU 29, Nevada 24. The Mustangs avoided a historic upset. They were 28.5 point favorites when this game kicked off. The biggest upset last year was, I believe, at 26, maybe 26 in the hook. And for the vast majority of this game, SMU was staring down the barrel of going 0-1 in Reno to Jeff Choate and his brand new team. They had the second most transfers in the country, second only to Colorado and Dion. And by most metrics, Nevada was picked maybe even to finish dead last in the country, 134th down there with Kennesaw State. I mean, Nevada's stock this year was not high. But guys, for the really three quarters, they looked like the more physical team, the more ready to play team, the more disciplined team. Trey, we had SMU players spitting on their opponents.
Allegedly.
Allegedly, with the camera operator did yank the camera to the sideline. I have to say,
those camera operators were so bad at that game.
Oh my gosh, that was
freshman intern, they couldn't get it on the kick return ever. They had it focused on the wrong goalpost on a field goal.
When you have players running in from off the screen, but they have the ball, you're doing something wrong.
So, sorry, go ahead, Mitch.
Random side note. When I was at St. Mary's University, we had a former employee, a guy that had worked for us, text us when he was at Texas State. And this is before Kenny even gets there, but this was when Texas State was still abysmal. And he texted us and went, just look up our broadcast of the Texas State Baylor home opener. It may be the worst production I've ever seen. Oh. This was from a Texas State employee. And it was like audio wasn't working. The camera was, way, way out of focus most of the time. It was truly impressive. They were clearly struggling. That effort from Nevada's media team made me think back to that story because, they just couldn't keep the camera centered at the right place.
It's so bizarre.
So distraught here on the YouTube side that he's
but it was so bizarre. It was just, I don't know how we're doing this with this was the second best game of the day, just objectively, when you're going into it. I don't know how they didn't have better production value ready to go. I mean, they had us levels of production value, except we're not getting paid to do this, right? We're putting out a slightly better product even when Trey loses internet connection and drops randomly. So at least we have the excuse that he's got maybe some interesting internet at times. We're us. We're not the whole Nevada media team and whatever they brought. Was it CBS was who was broadcasting?
Yeah, CBS Sports Network.
Yeah, so CBS, get your money up, not your funny up. What are you doing? Come on.
At least they weren't the FS1 crew where Tim Brando and Devin Gardner on the call there. They lost their comms. Gardner, I think it was his first broadcast ever. He keeps saying into his mic, "Can anyone hear me?" That is the number one cardinal rule of broadcasters. If something goes wrong, do not talk into the microphone. I was having a good chuckle there.
That was pretty bad.
SMU, 11 penalties for 125 yards in this contest. They were totally asleep at the wheel. Preston Stone goes 1 of 6 with an interception to start the game. They bring in Kevin Jennings, who we knew was going to play in that game, but all of a sudden, Garrett, the offense is sputtering. They bring in Kevin Jennings for a good deal, a couple of drives. I don't remember if it was 2 or 3 drives. It felt like quite a bit of time. And suddenly it felt like, man, you benched Preston Stone at the worst possible time. Now his confidence is going to struggle. It took him a little bit, even once he got back into the game, to get into a rhythm. Really, I don't think we saw him clicking until the fourth quarter when RJ Maryland kind of put the game on his back.
Yeah, man, something was up with SMU. I still don't really understand what happened and why they came out as flat as they did because, I mean, you're right. They had the talent advantage pretty much everywhere. They played really well last year. A lot of these are the same pieces. I mean, if you listen to anything of our preview for SMU, you understand, this is a team that had a lot of pieces coming back and a lot of reasons for optimism on both sides of the balls. This is a top 10 offense last year. And so to come out against Nevada just struggling, and now I do think I had seen something about the fact that they maybe hadn't won at Nevada in a couple of tries. I think I remember that from the broadcast. Don't know if that's 100% true or not. I may be making that up in my head. So maybe it was just, cursed when you play at Nevada. I don't know. But no, at the end of the day, they didn't really know what was working for them on the offense side of the football, and they had to end up figuring that out, right? They had to end up figuring what was working. And towards the end of the game, they did, because they found RJ Maryland, who is one of my favorite players in college football. And RJ Maryland absolutely took over the show in the last part of that football game, and ended up having, I think, like 52% of their total like receiving yardage. He just dominated the game. He finished with 8 catches for 162 yards and the touchdown that obviously put them ahead. I mean, huge. I was more shocked at the running production. They had almost nothing going on the ground. Brashard Smith did step it up, but man, like LJ Johnson, Jalen Knighton did not look good. They did not play well at all in that game. LJ did have the touchdown, but only 19 yards on 9 carries. It's 2.1 average. That's not good. That's not a good day rushing the football. So they're going to have to figure something out running the football. Obviously, I think Nevada did a pretty good job plugging up holes and saying, like, you're going to have to throw it. But even then, like, they couldn't figure out throwing the football. I think their next highest receiving total was, I'm checking up and down, 28 yards from Roger Daniels. Look, they're going to have to turn it up. And I say this, and I mentioned it off the top, I always say that these teams get one. If you're going to be a competitive team, if you're going to be one of those top-end teams that we're going to believe in, then you get one game where you can actually show up and play pretty bad. It's a bad time to burn your one if you're SMU, but you know, you get your one, you played poorly, go show up next week and start tearing it down a little bit, and then maybe we can start to talk about, okay, well, now you're a good team, you're a good squad that we can start believing in for the ACC. But I mean, in terms of ACC teams, SMU could be in a worse spot right now. There's certainly teams in the ACC that would, you know, like to switch places with SMU right now.
Preston Stone went 17 of 30 for 254 yards, touchdown and a pick. But you back RJ Maryland's share out. He had 8 catches for 162 yards and a touchdown, all in the second half. And you have 13 catches for 146 yards. That's it. If RJ Maryland doesn't kind of put on Superman's cape and come to the rescue there. Trey, welcome back. We've just been talking about kind of the futility of SMU's offense. Are you concerned about SMU as they get ready to play, of all teams, Florida State in an ACC opener here in a couple of weeks, end of September? Or do you chalk this up as Reno's a weird place to play, week 0 matchup?
I think there's a little of both. I'm concerned about the lack of discipline that we saw, because it seemed like every time they started building momentum, they just shot themselves in the foot with a penalty. It was a holding penalty or a face mask on an offensive lineman trying to block, or a pass interference when they really didn't need to be in be face guarding at that point on a badly thrown ball. So, man, the defense showed me a lot to put up with what the offense was doing. They held Nevada down. Nevada really, you think about, they got set up with an interception. They got set up with a special teams miscue with a fumbled snap on a punt. This could have still been a laugher for SMU. So I'm not, as crazy as it sounds, it showed me a lot that they came back together and came back to actually win the ball game. That showed me a lot, and that was really as encouraging as someone who wants SMU to do well. The fact that they were in that situation is obviously very concerning, but they did show a lot. They could have packed it up, chalked it up as not their day, and gotten on the first flight back to Dallas. They did not. They came back. They imposed their will in the fourth quarter, outscored them 16-0 in the fourth quarter, and made plays when they needed to, right? Like, the defensive line could have gotten lazy when they got the safety, but they went all out to get that safety, right? So there was a lot of good and intermixed, and a lot of bad. And what I like about SMU's schedule setting up is they ramp back up, right? This Nevada game, flush it, move on. You got Houston Christian next week. Look good against Houston Christian, please. Like, don't struggle against one of the worst teams in the FCS. But then you got BYU, a formidable team in the Power 4, but one that you should beat relatively easily. Then you got a rivalry game against TCU before you play Florida State. That's a really nice natural progression. I'm not pressing the panic button just yet. I would have if they didn't come back to win the game. But because they came back and won and showed that resolve, I'm willing to give them another chance and see how the next 3 weeks plays out.
SMU's kind of on the all faiths tour there. Houston Christian,
Yeah.
BYU, and TCU. They're beating up the religious circuit before they get to FSU.
Yeah, I mean they're the Southern Methodists, so
And then bookending it with Nevada and Florida State is just kind of encompassing the natural progression of life when it comes to like religion and faith. So there you go.
Oh boy, I tend to I watched Rhett Lashley's press conference after that game, and on CBS he was almost embarrassed to talk to Amanda Guerra. You know, he kept saying like we should not have won this game, but we did. And so I'm sure this week in practice is going to be hell on the hilltop. Those guys are going to get the fear of God put into them, I think, a little bit by this coaching staff. And I expect them to come out and be a lot better. Certainly against Houston Christian and BYU. We'll see what happens with TCU. I mean, I'm not even sure that we know what TCU is going to look like. They get their first big test against Stanford to start week one. We'll talk about that game, I'm sure, coming up in the preview.
Gracious him. How about that?